Okay, let's get started with our code. So let's have a look at the resources. Okay, here's our CSS. That's fine, we're not going to touch that. Just centering the content and applying background colors basically. Okay, here is our HTML, and essentially when I click the submit button, we want to run our first chunk of JavaScript. Okay, and we got to do two things with that. We got to write the code, and we're going to store that into our local storage.js folder in the script subfolder. Okay, it's empty at the moment, so we've got to give this a name, and let's follow what we have in here. Okay, we're going to call this function check form, and then our second chunk of JavaScript for reading the local storage values on the second page. We're going to call that read local storage. Okay, so let's type that in. Okay, so we put the word function in, which I think is the same as in Java, isn't it? I was going to say you can correct me on that if I'm wrong, but of course you can't correct me. Okay, so there's the first thing. This is the name of our chunk of JavaScript, and the next question is, where am I going to run that? Okay, so the brackets, the ordinary brackets are empty here because we're not actually storing information into the function when it runs. Okay, inside the code, the JavaScript will actually find the information, but we're not passing it into the function before the first line of the function is actually run. So we are going to copy this here. Okay, check form. We go back to our form, and essentially we know that the submit button is related to the action property. Okay, so everything being okay, we click on the submit button, we're going to go straight to action. But we don't want that to happen so easily. Okay, so we want to deal with our event. So when we click the submit button, okay, that is the onSubmit event. When we click on that, we are going to run our function. Okay, check form. And essentially what we want to do, we want this check form function to return a value of true or false. Okay, if the check form returns true, that means our web page is valid. Essentially that means the first text box has got a value of more than three or more characters. If that's true, then we're going to return the word true. And if we return the word true, then the action can happen. However, if the first text box doesn't have 3 or more characters, we are going to return false. And if we return false, the action won't happen. And we will tell the user there's a problem using an alert message. And we will highlight the text box with the value whose number of characters is too short. So that's what we're going to do here with check form. Okay, so onSubmit equals, and then in quotation marks, return space the name of the JavaScript function. Okay, let's return to the resources, and we'll put in the second function afterwards. Okay, so we've done this. We've got our onSubmit, and here is, okay, I'm going to return to that. Let's forget about that for the moment. What do we want the JavaScript to do? Okay, essentially we want to do this here. Okay, we want to check the length of what was typed for in the name. If what was typed in was less than 3 characters in length, what are we going to do then? We are going to tell the user, we're going to highlight the text that's in error, we're going to force the browser to stay on the same web page. However, if what was typed in has a valid number of characters, we are going to write the name to local storage, we're going to write the age to local storage, we are going to write the country to local storage, and we are going to go on to the next web page. Okay, so force the browser to stay on the same web page, we're returning false. Allow the browser to go to the next web page, we are returning true. Okay, so let's you can sort of read through that. Hopefully this is familiar to you based on your knowledge of programming so far. If you are writing code, the last thing you should do is write code. Okay, understand the problem, read through the information a few times, write down the instructions in ordinary English or in pseudocode. Check you have the instructions in the right order. Okay, for a particular instruction, for a particular line of pseudocode, are you doing it once? Are you doing it sometimes? Are you doing it more than once? Okay, if you're always doing it and you're doing it only once, it's not going to be either in a loop or in an if statement. If you're sometimes doing that line, you are going to have it in an if statement. So for example, returning true if everything's okay, you don't always return true because sometimes the user might have just typed in one letter for a username. More than once, if you do the same thing more than once, you're going to run a loop. Okay, so let's type or let's actually just paste our pseudocode in here. Okay, like that. Okay, so we have to check the length of what was typed in for the name. Okay, in order to do that, we need to access the value of the name text box. Okay, so we have the first text box has ID equals the name. Let me just double check that so we're all on the same page. ID equals the name. Okay, these are form elements. Okay, they're tags. Another word for tag is element, as you know from looking at your errors in HTML validation. Okay, so what I want to do here, let's think it through logically. I want to get the value of this text box whose ID is the name, and I want to check the length of it. Okay, so I need to work out the length of the value of the text box whose ID is called the name. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, I'm even saving you the trouble of typing this up. That's what we need to do here. Okay, let me just copy that and we can paste it in here. Okay, document.getElement by ID. Remember, element is just another word for tag. Get element by ID, the name. Now, if you are copying the code from the Word document, you'll notice the quotation marks are slanted. Okay, that's just a function, a feature of the Courier new font in the Word document. Okay, so what we need to do is, that's going to give us problems in Notepad++, is we need to just change that. Okay, so what do we want to do? Document.getElement by ID. Watch the syntax here. Small g, small d for document, small g for get, large E for element, large B for by, large I for ID. Okay, and then whatever the actual ID is in ordinary brackets, quotation marks. And what are we interested in? We're not interested in the whole form element and all its properties. We're interested in one property. Okay, the value, and we are interested in the length of that. Okay, let me just go back here so I'm not putting you wrong. So any form element, or in fact any property of any tag, we can access it with JavaScript by just putting it after document.getElement by ID dot whatever the value is. We could do placeholder, whatever value, min, max, like that. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to get the value of this element, okay, of the first text box, and then we need to move or assign the value into a variable. Okay, so let's copy that in there. Okay, like that. And let's paste it in there. Okay, var the typed name, and in fact let's get rid of that for a second. Okay, so that's the first line of JavaScript. Okay, the type name is going to store the value of the first text box. Okay, so that's the first line of code, and then we basically have an if statement. Okay, so if the length of what was typed in, so it's going to be the and I'm just creating this JavaScript variable because it's just shorter to write than document.getElements by ID, the name.value. Okay, so if this is less than 3 characters, okay, but it's the length, okay, it's the length of what was typed in if that's less than 3. What are we going to do? We are going to tell the user, we're going to highlight the text that's in there, we are going to force the browser to stay on the web page. And then line 12 there on the screen is actually to do with if the length is correct. Okay, so let me just paste that out here, and what I'm doing here essentially is I'm using my pseudocode as comment statements. And then we're going to tell the user. Okay, so we've some message then. I better keep to the name is not long enough, 3 or more characters, please. Okay, like that, and we'd put a semicolon at the end of that, which is the normal syntax for JavaScript. Okay, I want to select what was typed in. So in that particular text box. Okay, so I'm going to run a JavaScript function called select, and that's just going to highlight in blue the text that wasn't long enough. Okay, like so, like that. Okay, and then we have to force the page. We have to force. We have to force to stay on the same page. So we are going to do that by just saying return false. Okay, so the action is not going to kick in then. Okay. Next bit. Okay, else. Now, this means we have a valid number of characters. Okay, so what are we going to do here? We're going to do a few things here. Sorry, I just like to get organized like that. Okay, and let's just return to the Word document. Sorry. So what is this all about here? Okay, this looks quite complicated here, lines 41, 44, 47 of the screenshot. But what I'm doing here is I am getting the value in these 3 lines, getting the values, of the 3 form elements. Okay, so document.getElement by ID, the name, the age, the country. So you can look those up in the code just to satisfy yourself. If we just click on ID, okay, the name, the age, the country. Okay, and what I want to do here is I want to get those values. I want to give them another name here, and I am going to write them into local storage, local storage.setItem. Okay, like that. So let me just type that in. So we've got that written in now. Local storage, okay, notice small l, large S, dot set item, small s, large I, and then whatever the name of the area in local storage, whatever that space is going to be called in memory, the underscore name. I'm just using the underscore here deliberately to show you that it's different from the actual name on the ID of the form element in the HTML page. Okay, so you say where it's going to go in local storage, comma, what is actually going to be stored in there. So I've got these 3 lines, the value of the particular form element ID. Okay, so document.getElement by ID, the name, getElement by ID, the age, getElement by ID, the country, dot value, and then